Verse 6, but it is not that the word of God has taken no effect, for they are not all Israel who are of Israel. Now he's making a point that the people who rejected God are not true Israelites anyway, because they weren't circumcised in the heart as well as in the flesh, as it says, I believe, in Jeremiah. You need to be circumcised in the heart as well as in the flesh. Now, the Gentiles are not circumcised in the flesh. There's a distinction still. So the true Israel are the Jewish people believing in the Messiah. They are not Gentiles believing in the Messiah. And you can just study this and understand it. Verse 7, nor are they all children, because they are the seed of Abraham. But in Isaac your seed shall be called. Now he's going to make a point that Isaac was the chosen son, and even before, when Ishmael was born and Isaac was born, there was a dispute, and Sarah said to get rid of the maidservant and her child, and he was distressed. Abraham was distressed about that, and he said, don't worry about that. In Isaac, your seed will be reckoned. And so what that's saying is that there is a divine election. God has chosen certain people for certain things. Ishmael was not chosen. Isaac was chosen. They were both of the body of Abraham, but only through Isaac was the promise to be reckoned. Okay. Verse 7, nor are they all children, because they are the seed of Abraham, but in Isaac your seed shall be called. Verse 8, that is, those who are the children of the flesh, these are not the children of God, but the children of the promise are counted as the seed. Okay, so Ishmael, even though he was a child of the flesh, is not a child of the promise. There are people in the Jewish community who are not the seed of Abraham according to the Spirit. They are Jewish people, but they are not the divinely elected ones. And right now, Jewish people are coming to their Messiah. They are the true Israel. Not the Gentiles, we are the church. Okay? But there's something that's going on that Paul is explaining, and it's difficult, and people misinterpret these verses, and then you come into spiritual Israel, and you come into the church replacing Israel. That didn't happen. Verse 9, for this is the word of promise. At that time I will come, and Sarah shall have a son. Okay, so God promised that Sarah would have a son, not the maidservant Hagar. And so the son of Sarah is the son of promise even before he was born. Verse 10, and not only this, but when Rebekah had also conceived by one man, even by her father Isaac, for the children not yet being born, nor having done any good or evil, that the purpose of God according to election might stand, not of works, but of him who calls, it was said to her, the older shall serve the younger. So she's got these two children in her womb, they're struggling, and she goes and inquires of God, why is this happening? What's going on? And he said, there's two nations in your womb, the younger shall serve the older. God divinely elected them before time, before they were conceived, and even when they were in the womb, as to who would be the chosen seed. Verse 13, as it is written, Jacob I have loved, but Esau I have hated. Now that comes from, I believe, the book of Malachi. As a matter of fact, I know it is. And he's saying that Jacob he loved, they were both in the womb, and before either had done any right or wrong, it was divinely elected that Jacob would be the chosen of Isaac. Okay? And Esau, God says, I've hated him, but I've loved Isaac. And so his divine election rested on Isaac and not on Esau. What shall we say then? Is there unrighteousness with God? He's asking an obvious question. If God is choosing one over another, is there unrighteousness in him? Is he being unrighteous by choosing one group of people rather than another? Certainly not. For he says to Moses, I will have mercy on whomever I will have mercy, and I will have compassion on whomever I will have compassion. God is the creator. He created this pot for this reason. He created this pot for this reason. He can do whatever he wants with them, just like the potter. Okay? If he created me for destruction and somebody else for salvation, isn't that his choice? Isn't he allowed to make a choice of what he does with his own creation that didn't exist until he spoke it into existence? Of course he does. All right? Verse 16, so then it is not of him who wills, nor of him who runs, but of God who shows mercy. Okay? Somebody wills to be in God's favor, somebody runs to be in God's favor, and they're not because it's God's choice. I can't will myself to be in God's favor, only God can choose that. Verse 17, for the scripture says to the Pharaoh, for this very purpose I have raised you up, that I may show my power in you, and that my name may be declared in all the earth. So Pharaoh was chosen as an instrument of God's decision-making process. I am going to show myself holy through you, okay? For this very purpose, I have raised you up, meaning Pharaoh, that I may show my power in you. Pharaoh rejected God's sovereign will for the people of Israel. He says, I'm not going to let your people go. God says, I'm going to show my power through you, because when you reject them, I am going to demonstrate that I am stronger than you are. And so that's what's going on here. Is God is sovereign, and he is making these choices based on his own sovereign purposes. All right? Verse 18, therefore he has mercy on whom he wills, and whom he wills he hardens. It says several times in the book of Exodus that God hardened Pharaoh's heart. Now, does this mean that he actually went in and did this to Pharaoh, or does it mean that Pharaoh, by rejecting God again and again, his heart was hardened to the things of God, and God knew that would happen, and that he would demonstrate himself through the hardening of Pharaoh's heart? That's a theological point that people will disagree on. I believe that God would have chosen that Pharaoh be saved, but knowing Pharaoh's disposition and the position he was in and the pride he had in him, he hardened Pharaoh's heart passively, not actively, I believe. Anyway, 19, you will say to me then, why does he still find fault? For who has resisted his will? This is a really good point, okay? God hardens Pharaoh's heart, and so how is Pharaoh, liable for his decisions? If God is the one that's hardening his heart, then how can you find fault in him? How can you say, Pharaoh's doing wrong when it's you that's hardening his heart, all right? But indeed, O man, who are you to reply against God? Once again, he's the creator. We are the creation. If Pharaoh's heart is hardened because of his disobedience or because of his pride or stubborn heart or whatever reason, and God rejects him, that is God's sovereign choice. He will reject who he rejects. He will harden who he hardens. That is his sovereign choice. And we can't say, well, God is unfair. He created everything. If he wants that tree to be burned up right now, that's his choice. Somebody could say, well, I love that tree. It brought me shade all these years. It doesn't matter. God created it. He can do whatever he wants with it. Likewise with the human. We can shake our puny fists in God's face, and we can be angry at God for doing the things that he does. But in the end, it is his will that will prevail and not ours. Verse 21, does not the potter, here I just use this example, it comes from Jeremiah, and it says right here, does not the potter have power over the clay for the same lump to make one vessel for honor and another for dishonor? He's got one lump of clay, he divides it in two, makes a nice pot for putting on a shelf with painting all over it, and he uses another one for a spittoon. That's the potter's choice. God uses us in a similar way for his sovereign purposes. He is the potter. We are the clay. We are not able. We can do it. He gives us free will to shake our fists in his face, but we're not going to override his sovereign will. All we can do is say, your will be done, oh God. This isn't rocket science. This isn't something that we should be bucking against God over, but people do it all the time. Well, what about the poor guy in Africa that never heard of Jesus? Or what about this guy? Why is he going to hell because he doesn't believe in Jesus? That's God's sovereign choice. It's not mine. He is the creator. Verse 22. What if God, wanting to show his wrath and to make his power long known, endured with much long suffering the vessels of wrath prepared for destruction? Okay, in order to show how he is long suffering, he prepares these vessels for destruction, and he says, look, I'm kind to him, I'm kind to him, I'm kind to him, and they keep rejecting me. Look at Israel. He says, I've held out my hand to a stiff-necked people, a people of hardened hearts. Again and again, I send the prophets to call them and to call them and to get them to return to me, and they don't do it. And God is long suffering, and it shows how merciful, graceful, and honorable he is by doing this. And this is the point Paul is making. Read it again. What if God, wanting to show his wrath and to make his power known, endured with much long suffering the vessels of wrath prepared for destruction? The people of Israel rejected Jesus Christ. They were destroyed, but for thousands of years he was calling them, preparing them for the coming Messiah, and they still rejected him. And that he might make known the riches of his glory on the vessels of mercy, which he had prepared beforehand for glory. He prepared us for glory before the world was created. Now, I believe that we have a sovereign choice in accepting that, but he prepared these people according to his own glory and for his own purposes. And how wonderful does it show when we call on Jesus and are saved and we say, what a great God you are to accept me, a sinner. And this is the point that Paul is making. He's showing the long suffering on one hand and the riches of his glory on the other.